Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of SaaS Leaders Lounge, and today I'm joined by a special guest. Hi Indu, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you, Paris?
I'm doing well, fresh back from the Christmas break and ready to go.
Yes, same.
Perfect. It looks like a very great background over there. You still enjoying the warm weathers of the Caribbean?
Yeah, yes, I can't complain. I did a couple of weeks back in the States for the holidays, and it was nice to see family, but I can't do that cold weather for much longer. So good to be back.
Amazing. And I guess I always like to have our guests share an introduction into themselves. So if you could, I know many people have seen your current role as more of a consulting role, working with startups and founders to help with their go-to-market strategy. But you've also been a founder and spent many years as an individual contributor, in the sales ecosystem. So I'd love for you just to give me a bit of a background into how you got into tech and where that passion really came from to, engage with people, build that relationship and help them to solve challenging business problems.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been in sales probably since my very first job out of college. Um, my first job out of college, wanted to quit because I'm like, I am not a salesperson whatsoever. But I think just working for different companies, different products that you're passionate about, and getting to experience different levels. So between being an IC, a BD, all the way to leadership, you really start to discover different facets about that you really enjoy and have passion for. So I would say most of my career has been spent on the sales side, as well as a little bit of time on the customer growth side. And then I took a big departure from sales, kind of, because when you own a business, everything is kind of selling, but took a few years to start my own business with my husband called Chef Banzi, which is a food delivery service for locally based chefs. And then soon after moved into consulting, which is what I'm doing now at GTM Advisors.
Amazing. And we will go into Chef Pansy a little bit later, but what I want to go back to is really the beginning. And, when you was in the business development role, maybe moving into account executive work that you was doing, you had a lot of success there pretty early. And what I always like to find out is maybe some of the biggest lessons you learned, being in the sales space. What were the biggest skills that you needed to acquire? What was the biggest, challenges you faced in closing those deals, building that pipeline? What did that really look like?
Yeah, so I would say, like, if we're broadly speaking about biggest lessons learned, um, one of the biggest things I would recommend is just shadowing as much as you can. I think a lot of times, especially in sales, what that translates to for a lot of people is let me shadow the top performer and see what they do and try to replicate it. I think, something that really helped me do better at sales is having a broader range of folks to start shadowing, because the top performer, you're going to learn a lot from them and you should absolutely listen to what they're doing and understand what's working. But stylistically, you're going to take different things from different people across the team, and everyone has something they can teach you. So I think first and foremost, that was the biggest thing I learned is just, let me shadow as many people within reason on the sales team and understand how they're pitching things. From that comes knowledge base of, like what objections are coming up and how are they handling it, what use cases come up with certain customers. So you build that foundation. But also, for me personally, I struggled because the first few people I started to shadow, it's like, I don't talk like that. That's not who I identify with stylistically as a salesperson. So early in my career, that was important, was to have more people I could really start to look at and take little nuggets from, and then make it my own authentic sale. I'd say that would probably be something that's led to a lot of my success, is just learning from others. And then I think the other thing is just cross collaboration. So in sales, we tend to get this like rah, we're one team mentality, which is great. But a lot of my education has come from working with sales engineers, solutions consultants, some of the marketers at our company, to really understand what they hone in on or what's important to them, especially in roles where I was selling to marketers. So I think those two things very foundational building blocks for me as I was starting my career that I think I attribute a lot of success to.
And you mentioned working with marketers and pre-sales experts. I guess being more on the technical side, they've got a deeper understanding of the product, right? And that then gives you a bigger understanding of the capabilities, the features, the drawbacks, and you're able to build more of a trusted advisor status with the customers. And I guess when we look back 10 years and we look to where we are today, I guess the transition and the focus of selling has changed, right? From feature selling or, selling on the products, use cases, but really now more focused on the value of the product and the value that it brings to the
Yeah.
customers versus the challenges that they have. And you earlier you mentioned that piece about taking nuggets from others because you'll learn little pieces there, but also being personal. And I guess that's something that I've learned from being in the sales space, I guess, really is that you need to be yourself, and being unique is what people really resonate with, right? If you're trying to be something you're not,
Yeah.
it usually work out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard firsthand, from clients and prospective clients where, a lot of people kind of mirror you. So when they're talking to a lot of salespeople who are not like you and they identify with you, it already sets you apart in many ways. So I think, yeah, having that authenticity throughout the process and really embracing who you are as a salesperson versus who other people are and what good technically looks like, I think really makes a difference early on. And then I think to your point with, from an SE perspective, um, things being focused on technical feature functions. I think one of my first experiences with an SE I was working with is I went to her as a eager new salesperson being like, the customer said that they want this. And she's like, okay, wait, what is the use case? What are they trying to achieve? And I think that challenge, especially early on in your career, is not necessarily something you get on just sticking within strictly sales because we're all numbers focused. We're trying to get to that target. When you get someone technical who's trying to facilitate a use case or has to support the customer at the end, they really push you and help you ask those questions to the point that it becomes ingrained. Now I, make it part of my process, make sure that every time I talk to a prospect or a client, these are the things I'm thinking of.
I guess a question I have being in recruitment and talking to a lot of talent leaders in the space, I guess, is what would you say are the key skills that you need to develop in the SaaS sales space? And what would you personally identify as crucial to building those relationships with peers and customers?
Yeah, so I think for me, this has always been what I think is probably the number one skill to have across any profession, but especially in SaaS sales, is research. So doing your homework on who your end client or prospect is so important. And I realized this early in my career, like I had been given an opportunity to move from a BDR role to testing out mid-market sales at a company that had always been enterprise. And for me, arriving in that role, I'm like, okay, we don't have any resources. I don't have a book of business, so I don't know who to target. I don't know who I'm competing with because these are downstream technology vendors. And I don't know how I should be pitching differently. So a lot of it was research for even my own benefit of who I should be reaching out to. But from doing that and looking at resources like, the Inc. 500, 5000 and figuring out who's growing quickly, and then realizing what incumbents or competitors we're dealing with makes you that much stronger because you understand the ecosystem you're going into. But especially when you're selling to mid-market companies or high growth startups, I know how I feel having been in that position. This is what you breathe day in and day out. And if you're going in to pitch me and you don't know enough about my business, I already don't feel like I can trust you to buy your solution enough. So being in that role made me realize truly the importance of being able to research in a way that's not just, superficial, like, okay, great, you have funding, but get a few layers deeper than that and understand what their actual goals are, what the obstacles they might be dealing with are based off of their growth stage or their hiring goals or whatnot. And always go in with that information because especially now in SaaS sales, there are hundreds of thousands of competitors out there, depending on what you're selling. Like, the easiest way to stand out in the crowd is to be hyper personal and know what you're talking about. So I'd say that's probably the biggest skill that I'd say is the most important across every role, but especially here in SaaS sales.
Great. And you answered a bit of my question, which I was going to go on to next, but it really is about if you do your research and you know your product will meet, the use case and the challenges for the customer, what do you still find to be the biggest challenge when you're trying to get buy-in from execs within the business around, purchasing the solution, or in today's role that you're doing, maybe into buying into a new strategy, or when you had your business, getting people to buy into your ideas. So it's really understanding the challenges you faced with getting that exec buy-in.
Yeah. So I think, biggest thing is just being multi-threaded in general. So if your conversation is strictly with the champion the entire time, you're kind of at odds unless that champion is actively bringing you into these conversations. But establishing that multi-threaded communication from the beginning is important. I think a lot of salespeople struggle with, and I have too in my career, with I've established this great connection. How do I go beyond you? Does it feel like I'm going behind your back to get introductions to other people? But there are easy ways to navigate that. And there are ways that you can align their exec team with your exec team to really facilitate a little bit more of that camaraderie. So I'd say that's been a big obstacle, is you can have a great conversation with a champion who loves your product and sees how it's solving their issues. But if you don't have the final decision makers buy-in, it's a big problem. So having that executive sponsorship to any degree is always helpful. And then I think people sometimes boil solving a pain or an issue into one facet, which is, this will help me make more revenue, which is great. But I think in every deal, there needs to be emotional pain and rational pain that you're solving. So emotional pain might be certain stakeholders where you're letting them go home early to spend time with their kids because they're not doing all this manual work. What does that translate to for an executive? That translates into time saved, where they can now repurpose extra hours for things that actually lead to bigger business goals. So I think having those two sides of the argument are really important. And a lot of times we get a little pigeonholed into emotional or rational without really thinking of both and how they work together.
I just wanted to ask, in terms of your step from being an AE, individual contributor, to a team lead to a manager, what I wanted to understand was, what was the biggest learning curve for you personally?
Yeah, so I was fortunate in that I did have a VP at the time who was extremely supportive and also very transparent. So gave me feedback on where to focus and also the support on how to get to sort of the next level. I'd say the biggest deficiency for me is, like, naturally, I love working with people. So that was very easy for me. I understand the steps it takes to get a deal to progress. But when it comes to being a director or VP level, it's very much about the analytics. So being able to analyze the numbers and the data of a deal and understand, okay, this is higher than your average age of a deal, or this is a very small ACV compared to what we should be targeting. And I think that was probably my biggest deficiency going into that role, is I'd never been exposed to how to really leverage data in a way that made decision making a little bit more impactful and a little bit more unbiased. For me, it was very much, let me work with my team, figure out, what they're doing well in, what they need help in, and then where these deals are getting stuck. And even here, like at GTM Advisors, it's something that I see across the board, is so many people are being promoted to frontline managers for the first time. And they have that same barometer that I did going into their role, where it's, I can work well with people, I know how to analyze the deal, but they're not getting that data and analytics backbone that really helps, set them apart from a good manager to a great manager. So I'd say that's something that I personally struggled with and have gotten much better with now that I've realized deficiency and gotten the coaching. But it's also something I see across the board that, if you're a leader, definitely invest in that when you're promoting folks up the chain.
And when you became a director, then would you say focusing on the analytics piece, you didn't have to get involved so much with the customers, but it was more about the revenue operation side, working with those different teams and being able to come up with new ideas and strategies to really enhance the ability to close deals and be the ratio to be as close to what it needs to be, especially at that enterprise or similar level, commercial level, whichever it was in that business.
Yeah, I think it kind of moves you, like with that knowledge, it kind of moves you away from the anecdotal, I'm not in every meeting, I'm not listening to every call, to big picture. I see that there's a fire here based off of this number that should be a lot higher or a lot lower than it should be. Let me start digging here. So I think as a manager, it makes you more efficient and it gives you the indicator of where to start digging. And when you have a large team, that's extremely important. Time is valuable. So knowing where to go first to really uncover a problem is important. But also, me back then, and also what I see today as I work with clients, is it's very gut feel based. So something someone said in a one-on-one didn't sit right with me. We need to dig into that. But it's just by happenstance that happened to come out during a one-on-one. So you're now investing your time in it. And that might not actually be the most crucial problem. So I think that analytics perspective of, okay, let me remove emotion from it. Let me remove one-on-one conversations from it and have this inform my initial hypothesis of where I, as a manager, director, or VP, should start digging. And then from there, use the anecdotal evidence of what my rep is telling me or what their calls sound like to inform where the true work needs to be, is really the direction that I eventually got to. But I definitely did a lot of work early on in my career.
And you mentioned it earlier that you brought, Chef Pansy to Salt Lake City, and it was, an idea that you and your husband have been thinking about for a while. I'd love to dive into what led you to leave the stability of the corporate world in sales, where I guess you were overachieving and doing very well, and maybe do something which you and your husband felt was something that was great for the local people there, and also felt that you was giving back. And where did that idea come from, and what was some of the lessons and challenges you faced along that journey?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's honestly, even though I'm in sales, I'm one of the most risk averse people on this world. So it was a terrifying decision to make. I think in that period of time in my life, just a lot of change happened. So we went through a merger at our company, and I was just ready for a change. I really liked my career progression, even when I was leaving, but I was just ready for something new. And frankly, ready for a break. A lot of times when you go through something like that, you're like, okay, I just need to figure out what my hobbies are outside of work. And then we moved to Salt Lake. So we were in the Bay Area, and then we moved to Salt Lake, and it felt like we were in a new community. So I think the biggest thing that sparked is when I left my previous job, we traveled for about a year. And when you don't have sort of the chaos of work always on your mind, you start to discover things you really like. So for us, it was little hole in the walls that had amazing food, like little cafe in Italy where they have two things on the menu, but it's like the best one thing you've had in your life. And we had the luxury of doing this for 8 to 10 months, and then we came back to Salt Lake, and we're just like, we want this here. We know it's here somewhere. It's not Applebee's, it's not Olive Garden. Like, how do we find this? And so we decided, we're both not back to work yet. Let's just make a decision to invest in this and start Chef Pansy, which eventually became a delivery app just focused on those local mom and pop shops. So cost effective solution for them compared to the Uber Eats and DoorDashes of the world, but also a way to help them market who they are and what they offer and make it more of who the chef is behind the scenes versus just that name brand that everyone's familiar with.
I love it. And I guess being in a sales kind of background and environment, you I guess was in charge of driving the identifying the ICPs and the target market. I guess in that, where did you identify the ICP to be, and what was the challenge getting them on board, or was there no challenge there?
I will say, of all my sales jobs, this was the most challenging. So in terms of ICP, we started where I think a lot of founders do, which is I'm either your ICP or someone I know or several people I know is your ICP. So let me reverse engineer it. We know, some straightforward things where delivery isn't, it's a luxury. So you need to have some level of disposable income. We're not marketing to people who want to order McDonald's or, chain restaurants. We're really marketing to people who like a little bit more eclectic flavor and willing to try new things, travelers. We had a lot of influx of people moving from the Bay Area, New York to Salt Lake at the time. So it gave us a good idea of where to start. But honestly, the ICP shifted so much. And I think I see this today, even in consulting, is like you can start off with a broad idea of who your ICP is, but there's so many factors that influence and change it. Like, for example, macro factors. We went through the pandemic. All of a sudden, our ICP got really broad. Delivery is no longer a luxury. It is a necessity for most people. And then we went through little, things changing with the platform. For example, within the span of a week, we had like 6 or 7 vegan chefs sign up. And all of a sudden, vegans made up like 60% of our customer base. And we started to dig into it. We're like, they order the highest amount, like their AOVs are the highest. They tip our drivers well, so our drivers keep wanting to deliver from those restaurants. And they order 3 to 4 times a week. We're like, never thought about this. So now all of our ICP is shifting a little from, okay, let's stop promoting Jamaican jerk chicken as much or Boricua chicken. Let's get a little bit more on the vegan side of things. So I think, sort of long story short, is we started with a broad ICP, but like any business, you go through so many shifts based off of what your own business is doing or what the economy is doing and all these external factors, that it just truly came down to every 3 months sitting down and being like, how has her customer list changed? And why has it changed? Okay, maybe we should test this out because, we have more vegans or, whatever is changing in our business at the time.
So using the power of analytics and looking at the voice of the customer effectively helped you to change the dynamics of the business and I guess service a wider audience, right? And as it was a startup when you began the business, given the marketplace and where it was at that time, were you covering the demand generation and sales across the board, i.e., we look at drivers, restaurants, and customers?
Yes. Yeah, so we all played a part in it, but I was mainly trying to do the demand gen across a multi-sided marketplace. So that means making sure I have restaurants people can order from, drivers to deliver from those restaurants, and then customers who are actually keeping the whole thing alive. Um, so I'd say from the restaurant perspective, early on, it was a little bit of a challenge, but the value prop for them was so clear. We're not going to take 50 to 60% of what people are paying you, like Uber Eats or DoorDash. And this is community oriented. Anyone who's been an entrepreneur, especially in the food space, feels this camaraderie with every local business and wants to do better than all the chains. So they love the idea of what we were doing. And it was like a domino effect, really. Like the first few were hard, but once we got the first 2 or 3 major mom and pops, we no longer had to do lead gen at all. It was all inbound to us, which was a really nice moment. The customer side, it ebbed and flowed where we just have way too much demand and we're like, we have no drivers, to, oh my gosh, we need more demand, our drivers are complaining. So we did different things to help with the demand gen there. I'd say one thing that didn't work for us is just the standard forms of marketing. So paid Facebook ads did not work. Paid Instagram ads didn't work. General marketing campaigns and promotions were very short term. We'd get one and done customers who weren't really good lifetime value customers. But what did work is we're a local brand, right? We're all about promoting local chefs. Me or Caleb, my husband, or any of the chefs going into some of these local Utah food groups and being like, this app, you need to check it out, or hey, this chef is cooking this week. That generated so much more demand than any paid ad or email campaign we've ever run. And then same with the type of channel we were using. So instead of a generic Facebook ad, we used Nextdoor, which is basically Facebook for your specific communities. So each of our chefs would post in that and say, hey, we prefer using this delivery service because they let us actually keep our money and they're local like us. You should use them. And we got so much from that. The driver side of lead gen was the most brutal. This is the most back-breaking parts of the business. And I have to imagine even at Uber Eats and DoorDash or wherever you work, it's challenging because it's such a transactional role that you're recruiting for, and it's such a high turnover. So I'd say that was probably when it comes to, doing that lead generation and pre-sales work to really get drivers in the door. It's really recruiting. That's probably where we had our biggest issues. Is it was a constant cycle. You couldn't just count on having 50 good drivers and having them for a couple of months. It was 2-week periods. You were just constantly recruiting people, no matter how well you were paying or how good the experience was. Just in a role like that, it's a lot more difficult.
I understand. And in terms of running your own business, then I guess looking at customer feedback and surveys are crucial to enhancing the service that you guys provide. Is that something that was pivotal in the early moments of the business to ensuring that you was able to, pivot to the requirements of the audience?
Oh, definitely. So I think one benefit we had is we had live chat on our app. So you could either live chat with the chef directly or you could live chat with us. And so we get a lot of feedback. People would not hold back. So sometimes it was not things we loved hearing, but it was helpful. Sometimes it would just be understanding new zip codes people wanted us in that we hadn't considered. And it actually led to some product development because we had a lot of people who were like, I would love to see this as less of a transactional on-demand Uber Eats type thing and like a date night thing. So we developed something called What's for Dinner, where we actually planned a date night where we, surprise people with certain meals, have a menu, a video from the chef. And obviously from a margin standpoint, it's a lot more lucrative than just on-demand food delivery. So we did take a lot of the voice of customer insight to really propel how we were developing and how we were modifying things.
Amazing. And then I guess after a long period, for almost 6 years, you decided to step away and do something new, which led you to go-to-market advisors. I just wanted to understand how working with many founders and leaders in a consultative approach has enabled you then to help them solve their problems and fine-tune that go-to-market strategy, overall reducing costs and enhancing the profits, which I guess from a business owner perspective is top of the list at some point.
Yeah. It's kind of a big question to unpack. I think it kind of goes back to our earlier discussion about how important analytics are. I would say like 85-90% of the time someone comes to us, they have the main problem correct, which is something broad, like I'm not hitting revenue targets or I'm not equipped to hit my revenue targets next year. But a lot of their hypotheses about why they're not is a little flawed. So, we get a lot of, I don't think my sales team is good. We need to reassess and see if the org needs to be changed, or I need a lot of coaching to help them get up to speed. So I'd say the biggest thing that has helped us really drive profits and reduce costs is not taking that biased feedback at heart or to heart and actually doing our own assessment. So with every client we work with, we do a full audit. We look at CRM data to understand opportunity progression. We look at gong calls or chorus calls to understand how reps are pitching on the field. We do in-depth interviews, what we call therapy sessions, with everyone on the field, because so much of what is the problem is being trapped in this little level of the ICs that never makes it up to leadership. So that's always our first step in assessing what the true issue is. So I say that because it's a huge turning point for us. That's usually the biggest driver for us to help companies start reducing cost and improving operations, is actually determining the true root cause. And then from there, we start to do what makes sense. If it's ICP targeting being wrong, for example, we look at their data and give them a direction of who they should start selling to. If it truly is a skills issue, we can run workshops, do one-on-one coachings, things of that nature. But it's a lot to unpack because every company is a bit different. So, the solution is different based off of their problem.
And When you are working with software startups or scale ups, would you say it's generally a long term project where you need to engage with various resources from your organization to help them, achieve their overall goal in the long term? I guess it's not going to be just one advisor that will help them. It's a team of you that work together to unpack the problem and solve it, of course.
Yeah. Oh, the funny thing is, we are a very small but mighty team. So, yeah, all of us are pretty much involved across the board. So, for example, like I'm on the sales side, Liz is on the CS side, but oftentimes we're coming together on a lot of these projects. Um, and so I think more than our functions and roles that we've had in the past, because we've all really done every part of the sales funnel, is just different perspectives we bring. So we are definitely bringing everyone on board as we start to talk to executives and try to get a little bit more ingrained in their process.
Amazing. And just before I head on to a few questions around lessons learned and advice for others, I guess something that intrigued me a little bit and just wanted to cover briefly is your title when you was working at Winning by Design is a revenue architect. I guess it's self-explanatory to many what that type of role is about, but how did that role title actually become created? And in your own words, what is the key focus of somebody doing that role?
This is probably awful. I don't know the true like etymology of why that was called what it was called, but my perception of it was we aren't just consultants. We are truly helping businesses create a revenue engine. So we're architecting that engine that'll help you create revenue, not just in short term, but through all of your growth phases. So that was my takeaway for why we were titled that way, but I truthfully never actually asked.
No problem at all. Just as we, talk about other pressing topics in the industry, we look at women being promoted and given equal opportunities in the space. I guess some of my friends in the industry always want nuggets from others that have been successful in the space. So I would love to ask you if there's any specific advice you would give to those ladies in their early steps of their sales career. It could be even a pre-sales career who plan to at some point become people leaders. What would be the biggest pieces of advice that you would give them?
Yeah, so it's something I'm super passionate about. Just having been in the shoes of an early salesperson, being like, I'm not a salesperson based off of everyone I see around me. This is not me. I think the biggest piece of advice would be surround yourself with people that you can learn from, especially mentors. So it doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's like the top of their field, who's just the most lucrative mentor out there. Again, going back to you can learn something from everybody. And really have conversations, express where you're struggling, and try to get advice as much as you can. And then I think just a lot of people, and I won't say women in general, but I feel like with women, especially that I've spoken to and how I feel, you kind of create these two personalities of this is who I have to be at work and this is who I am in my personal life. Obviously, there's some things that shouldn't cross over, but for the
Yeah.
most part, try to bring your authentic self because it's one thing if you're proficient at what you're doing, but if you feel burnt out because you're wearing this mask the entire time, it's challenging. So as early in your career as possible, try to figure out how to be your authentic self because there are people who are naturally going to gravitate towards you because of that. It's not a weakness. So early in my career, I thought that, I identify as an introverted person generally. But when it comes to sales, I like to listen to people, what their needs are, and pick up on that and show them what might benefit them. I always thought that was a huge detriment to my career because I saw all of the extroverted, a lot of times men I was working with. Don't let that be a reflection on who you are and what your weaknesses are. Roll with who you are and try to figure out how to make it work with what you're doing. And then I think the other piece of advice is more on the mentor
Love.
side. Um, I would say mentors are so important. My advice to mentors would be don't feel like you have to be this perfect version of a mentor when you're talking to younger women who are starting out in their careers. My most life changing experiences or beneficial experiences were those moments where someone was just very candid and transparent with me about a time they just messed up. And I felt like I can empathize with you. Instead of being this idol I could never measure up to in my head, now I feel like I could get there because you've now, unveiled to me that you think and feel the same things I feel. So I think both sides of the coin on the mentor side, just be vulnerable once in a while, be transparent so you can get more women to really feel like they can get to where you are.
I really love it. And I guess mentorship is something, if you've listened to some of my other episodes, is something that we talk about a lot because I guess, when you're early in your career, having a mentor or a sponsor or something of that nature definitely can be highly valuable for you to learn and avoid making mistakes that, can be avoidable. But I guess also, as we all know, you have to make mistakes, right, to be able to learn and build that resilience, right? If you're only ever winning, you're never used to losing. And then when you
Yeah.
do lose, you might not be able to cope with it. So that's something important. And I guess on, being in the sales space, burnout is, can be very real. Is there any tips that you have to avoid burnout?
Yeah, so I'm a little biased in this because I love to travel, but take your PTO. No one is judging you. If they are, you're probably at the wrong company. If you're hitting your goals and you're doing well, take the time off because it's as beneficial to you as it is to your company because you come back refreshed and you can do better work. And then I think just consciously think about the things that drain you and the things that energize you and what you're proficient with that energizes you, that's where you focus. This has been something I've been battling with my entire career. As I get older, I'm like, there are things that I think I'm pretty proficient at that I just don't like to do. And that's part of being an adult. As soon as you get more responsibilities, you have children, you have a lot more to manage, you can't be spending your life focused on something that burns you out. So I think just be selective about where you want to focus, especially early on in your career. Take those risks. Don't be shy to gamble on a few things early on because it's when you really have the least to lose.
I agree. And just as we, start to conclude the episode, I guess we always have a quick fire question section and then we ask you a question from a previous guest. So a few quick fire questions I have are going to be very different today. And one of them is, in terms of when you was growing up, was there a sport that you was really entwined with and played heavily, or?
Oh my goodness, I am the least athletic person there is. Um, I will say soccer and track are probably the two that I did, but I won't say successfully. They were just enjoyable. The one I love the most, ironically, I'm 4'10", but I love basketball. Never very good at it
Oh, that,
either, though.
that makes two of us. Have you got a favorite basketball team? Will be my next question.
I was a Boston Celtics fan for a really long time. Um, I feel like I am a Warriors fan just because I lived in the Bay Area for such a long time, but those would probably be my two. How about you?
And mine personally is Boston, but that's just because growing up in school, my deputy head teacher was actually a native from Boston, and we used to have this deal that if I, reached certain goals, then when he went back home to visit Boston, he would bring me the latest jersey. So by design, I became
That's
a
so
Boston Celtics fan.
That's funny. Mine is
And
actually like I don't have normally people are like I watch the sport. I grew up in the city, so I like them, but actually my love for the Celtics came from playing 2K with my husband and always choosing the Celtics and always winning when I chose them. And in turn I ended up watching more Celtics games and really liking them. So kind of similar.
and they seem to be doing pretty well this year, which is a big
Yeah.
plus.
Yeah, definitely.
And the third quick fire question I have for you is, maybe it's a bit of a giveaway from the background, but would you say you're a cat or a dog person, personally?
Uh, Well, even though my dog back here looks like a cat, I am a big dog person. Love dogs. He is the love of my life. Have always been a dog person.
And what kind of dog is he?
He is a mix of border collie, blue heeler, and beagle. So that translates into an extremely energetic, smart dog who constantly outsmarts us.
Amazing. And I guess this is going to be a tricky question for you, given the background of the business that you created. But what would be your favorite type of food, having, I guess, tasted recipes from all over the world.
Yeah, it is really hard. I love Thai lob. I just feel like it's fresh, sour, spicy. I love a good ragu, like nice, slow cooked ragu. And then I'm a huge fan of El Pastor tacos. I think those are probably my top three, at least at this moment right now.
Perfect. And as I move on to a question from our last guests, the question I have here is, what was your first job and why was you good at it?
My first job was at a company called ARC. So it was kind of like when managed print solutions were very big. It's like the Xerox reps and people not just selling printers, but the kind of fancy version of that, which is we have a system to make sure you're efficient at your printing and save you money within your office space. So that was my first job. I think it was the job that made me think I don't want to do sales, not because of the team or anything like that. Everyone is great. And I did well in it. But I think what I realized from that job is that I need to be passionate about what I'm selling. Otherwise, again, it comes back to inauthenticity. If I don't believe in it, if it's not something that I feel comfortable being like, this is the best thing in the world, it's a lot harder for me to do my job. So I think I did well because I understood like the systems in place, the steps you needed to take to find the right prospects and to pitch the right product. But ultimately, it also helped me realize what I really do want in a career.
Amazing. And is there a question that you would like to ask for our next guest?
Um, let's see. I think on the heels of it being the new year, I guess my question would be, what is something you've never done, but you've always wanted to do? And what's prevented you from doing it?
It's a great question and one outside of the general kind of business world. So I'll be sure to ask that next. And again, I want to thank you, Indu, for your time. It's been more than a pleasure having you. We've had a great conversation. Your insights have been amazing. And also, the tips and advice that you would share to others making that journey in sales will definitely be valuable to those listening as well.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure chatting with you today.
Thank you very much. And I look forward to keeping in touch and speaking again soon.
Likewise. Talk to you soon.
You take care now. Bye bye.
Bye.